Hey everyone, I am going to talk about not a controversial topic, but a topic that a lot of casual players are not a fan of as a strategy. Understandably so, and I'm going to talk about how it differs in a competitive setting. But just like how spam has a very negative connotation in a casual setting, so does spawn camping. But in a sixes setting, spawn camping is a far more neutral term. It is merely a strategy that has plenty of counterplay. Most of it is kind of information-based counterplay of just understanding what your opponents could be doing and when. Because spawn camping is generally a very limited use strategy. You can't really do it all the time, and in fact, it's pretty rare. But that's what we're going to talk about today. So, spawn camping can encompass a bunch of things. It could literally just be stickies on a shutter that you det when people walk out. It's one of the more common examples. Or it could be a player that's behind and unspotted behind choosing to try and kill a player that's rolling out, right? You don't have to literally prevent them from walking out of the spawn. It's more so picking them off when they're not expecting a fight before they actually get to the front line on that rollout, right? So, I have a few examples here. And we're going to start off with denying forward spawns as a powerful option for spawn camping. Because as I've talked about in my video about spawns, forward spawns are a big deal in 5CP, because if you are able to cap the point and successfully deny those forward spawns, then you can usually just get the next point pretty much for free. Usually your team is going to be fast enough to get through the doors such that the team that now spawned all the way on last are not able to get there in time and establish good positioning in time. So you kind of have a leg up in that next fight, right? So being able to deny those spawns physically by capping the point is nice. But if your entire team is able to position on second, well, not second necessarily, but just whatever point those forward spawns are coming through, it's more common on second, I will say, then you can effectively spawn camp while controlling the point all in one maneuver. Or if you're a demo getting stickies on those spawn, in some cases the other team just might not expect it to be trapped and just haphazardly walk forward, and then suddenly that's another kill. You're effectively just extending their spawn time while also getting some nice stats for the log. But yeah, it can be very powerful. So as a result, spawn camping can be a pretty powerful tool there if you maybe don't expect to be able to stack, or you don't think you need to stack and can actually just get through and spawn camp immediately. You will prevent them from being able to get through in that point, force them to back spawn, and get that point for yourself. So it can be a very powerful tool as a result there. One thing I will say with regard to forwards is this is often a demo thing. It's either something a demo does or an entire team does, right? Because being able to prevent a spawn wave from getting through, which is oftentimes, sometimes more than one player even. I should have been shooting at the point there. We're going to lose now. So it's oftentimes like multiple players in these spawn waves, especially, if you're winning fights so decisively that you can get space fast enough to cap. It's usually off of multiple picks, so you expect there to be maybe multiple people in these spawn waves. That's not really something you can hold off as a soldier or a scout, simply because they can just resupply as long as you don't have the point capped and you aren't denying those forwards. So you're going to be trading out damage very unfavorably, whereas a demo can just trap it, and that kind of gets the job done. So it's usually either a demo doing it or an entire team, right? So as a demo, you can notice those heads up moments where if your team, wipes another team and you are fast enough to the forward, then you get to trap that out before they spawn, and as a result, you can potentially just get a pick, or at the very least, stall them for so long and this is like the very least, a lot of the time you're just going to be able to hold them out completely. But worst case scenario, you stall them long enough to get some form of value for your team, right? Knowing when to go for this is a little difficult because you don't really see when they're spawning, so it's kind of a vibe-based thing a lot of the time. Just a matter of like feeling it out through experience. But a lot of the time, like if they get even one spawn, like they spawn a scout or something, I'm just gonna call it off. Maybe, something like, Sunshine for that matter, you could be charging sticks and at least getting stickies on the shutter from choke, from relative safety. Or in the case of Snakewater, a little less safe if there's someone in Saw, but you can trap the forwards on second from window. So there are some cases where you can mildly spawn camp, at least apply some damage and pressure to the spawners from relative safety. But most of the time you're going to get success by just identifying that time where you can get there before anyone spawns if you're very fast, and getting there very fast, pretty much. And for that matter, actually no, that's what we're going to talk about next, is spawning or spawn camping as a flank play. And this is where that kind of a player being behind, killing the player rolling out type of thing starts to come into play a lot more. So if you are, for example, a soldier that's behind, let's imagine in the aftermath of a mid fight, you bombed behind during the mid, your team lost the mid while you're behind, and now you're just behind. So there's a number of things you could do. You could rebomb the combo from behind, try and do any number of things. But in this situation, let's imagine that your team killed their demo on mid, and only their demo on mid. So now you're stuck behind, and there's a demo spawning. Well, I mean, a decent play there is just to spawn camp the demo. And, play a position where that if that demo is not thinking about the fact that you're behind, or it hasn't been properly communicated, they might just commit out of the shutter where they can't re-enter the shutter, and then you just have a free 1v1, which, a soldier player is definitely expected to win against a demo. And the nice thing about a play like this is it still opens you up to do whatever you want to from behind. Whereas if you try and pinch with your team and bomb the enemy medic or something while you're behind, then that play is over. Versus spawn camp the demo, that possibility is still open to you, on top of the fact that you can just continue spawn camping that demo if they don't send anyone back to help. So that kind of play can be really powerful. Or, for example, you win a mid-fight so decisively that... excuse me. You win a mid-fight so decisively that you are able to go forward kind of uncontested and get somewhere really deep, maybe a little hiding spot really deep that the other team's not expecting. In the case of Sunshine, something I'm a fan of as a soldier is, you win that mid-fight very decisively. Or let's imagine you lose your own med, so it's not even ad, so you won't be able to push into last with ad. Meaning you're expecting to probably sack into last anyway once things stabilize. In a case like that, if you're really fast into last, you see, let's actually pause right here. You see like where their medic's standing at in that little corner there? You can hide in that corner if you're really fast. Keep in mind, these windows in spawn are one way, so they'll be able to see you jumping into last if you jump in after they've spawned. But if you can get into a spot like that, it's really never going to get cleared unless they're very certain that a soldier is hiding, in which case then it might, and we'll touch on that later. And you might just be able to kill their medic for free and suddenly turn it into a kind of mid to last situation where now you have add into last off of the mid fight. So being able to get really aggressive or just find those timings in which you can get in a position unspotted that you're not necessarily expected to can bring a lot of value when it comes to spawn camping. So yeah, I think that's probably all I have to talk about for the flank play type or style of spawn camp. This can apply to demo as well. And in some cases as a demo, I mean, you can do the same thing. You can spawn camp off a mid fight. On Sunshine, a little hard to do, but I like getting, forward traps in lobby. So the team rolling out. I mean, in some cases, I can only get traps on second. But if you avoid capping that point, if it's like a bit of a scrappy fight on mid, for instance, you lose some people, they maybe think, you know, hey, we can probably fight second. If you don't get cap time, then they're not going to even know anyone's on second, and sometimes you can just get an easy trap kill on someone who's not expecting things to be trapped yet. Stuff like that. Which, in a case like that, like, sure, you are trapping out second and not literally, you know, spawn. So whether you want to consider it a true spawn camp or not, I suppose is up to you, but it really falls under the same umbrella of strategy, of taking advantage of a team that is trying to establish positioning, not really ready to fight quite yet, just because you're able to find a timing and a position that they weren't expecting. Now, the last example I have to talk about, excuse me, actually happened in a pug last night. Unfortunately, this is not that demo, but the odds of that actually aligning correctly would be unlikely. And it's spawn camping for Banny time. So this is config dependent, of course, but for those unaware, the quote-unquote Banny config, or progressive rule set, is one in which after the time limit in-game of usually 30 minutes, you start going into overtime, no matter what the score is. And the max score is retroactively changed to whatever the leading team is, +1. So that, I know, sounds confusing, but in practice what it means is that when effectively the team that is up any number of rounds just needs to close out one more round to win, versus the team that's down rounds needs to catch up to tie and then outscore them, right? Even that sounds, it's really simple, like, don't get me wrong. But as a result, one quirk you'll notice is that if that timer is about to hit 0 and it's about to enter overtime, if you are the team that's, let's say, up 1-0, if you cap, then you're going to be up 2-0, and then the overtime hits, and then you need to get 3 rounds to win. Versus if you are capable of spawn camping for however long it has to be until it hits overtime, usually this is like only tenable for, oh, we're going to see some spawn camping here actually. Yeah, so I think this doesn't work. Oh, yeah, it doesn't. But you see the vision there. I would consider that spawn camp-esque of what I just did there. But anyway, we're talking about the Banny config. So if it is, for example, like 10 seconds left or something like that, and usually, you know, 30 seconds of spawn camping, you're really pushing it. Usually you really only see this in like 20 seconds or less. If you are able to spawn camp for that duration, then wait until the overtime hits and then cap, suddenly you win the game 2-0. You had to score 1 fewer round just because you were really heads up about the config and able to play around that. And instead of capping, spawn camp to try and delay the cap. Now, of course, this is a risky strategy because if you fail, then you look like a complete clown for trying to spawn camp and giving up the round. So a lot of the time in serious matches and whatnot, you know, you will play, you'll just take the round a lot of the time if it's cutting it too close. So there's that to consider. But yeah, that's the third example I have of spawn camping and when you might want to go for it when it's a useful strategy in a competitive setting. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is the counterplay, because the counterplay is quite simple to spawn camping, which is just be aware of when you can get spawn camped. I pride myself on very rarely dying to particularly like sticky trap spawn camping, just because I have a decent idea of when the other demo even has the time to do so. I'll still get spawn camped by a player behind if it's not called or something like that. But if a player's behind, then I'm asking for like a flank scout or something to come escort me. Or if I spawn with a soldier and we know someone's behind, I'm gonna ask them to roll out with me. And so we play together. So if that guy tries to spawn camp, it's a 2v1 that we should, in theory, win. Right? I remember missing literally every single thing here. That was unfortunate. So being aware of when spawn camping is possible is really like the majority of the battle. That gets most of it done. And beyond that, there are like literal techs you can do to break a spawn camp if you're in the cases of like a forward spawn camp, you can switch pyro and try and reflect, try and use like the detonator or score shot to clear sticks, try and, you know, bust the hold through means like that. Randomly load up some old demo here. Oh, it's still sunshine. That's possible. But by and large, just understanding. Just stutter peeking that shutter so the demo dets to nothing, and then suddenly they might be out of position and vulnerable and stuff like that. As well as, you know, if you lost a mid-fighter, for example, and you didn't spot the soldier, you don't know where he's at, then just start clearing corners. Have your med bait a little bit, and then just flush him out, find out where he's at. It is real. The counterplay to the to the spawn camping as a strategy really is just all in information, and that's maybe part of why it is a very neutral strategy in a competitive setting, but a lot less. Oh, the item server was down during this, so that's why these soldiers are on shotgun. This is funny. I heard some needles as well. So yeah, that's probably why in a competitive setting it's a much more neutral thing versus casually. Yeah, like if someone's behind, like a demo is behind, then they can just get a kill and it's not always going to get called, and they can kind of just spawn camp for multiple spawn waves because that adjustment isn't going to get made for a multitude of reasons. But of course, in a competitive setting, the counterplay is very simple. As long as you are playing heads up, as long as you're spotting things correctly, as long as you're thinking intelligently, and communicating above all, then spawn camping as a strategy is pretty measured. It's very easy to deal with, and again, very timing dependent, because the examples I'm talking about here are generally kind of specific. Like, I mean, you can even imagine the one I engineered of, you know, you're a soldier, your team lost quite a few people on, or your team lost medic on mid, or it wasn't even that. That was one of them. You lost a med, they lost a med, but like kind of wiped so you can get into their last, or you're behind on the mid and their demo is the only one that died, your team lost the fight. Stuff like that happens for sure. It's nothing crazy, but it is a little rare sometimes, so you're not going to be able to spawn camp every game. Definitely not. And as a result, being able to identify when you can spawn camp or do a spawn camp-esque strategy and when the other team can is just part of the skill of the game. So anyway, that's all I have to talk about spawn camping. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all next time.